Hello, I am Rachael Gorchov, member of Tiger Strikes Asteroid New York, and I'm here with my co-curator, Joe Yarrington, and we are in the exhibition that we curated here at the gallery at Tiger Strikes Asteroid New York called Catenations, ending this Sunday, October 11th.
And we thought because we've really had, it's been an interesting journey starting about a year and a half ago. And we've really been excited about the response to the exhibition and the feedback from the artist as well. And we thought it might be interesting to show you what the exhibition looks like and also perhaps get you down to see the show before it comes down on Sunday. As Rachael mentioned, on the 11th. So let's start with some pieces, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
So we're really happy with how this has come together, and right behind us is, up here on the pipes, is an artwork by Gail Biederman. I'm trying to span the pipes. It runs the length of the gallery on these water pipes that, as one of our members had mentioned when we were installing the show, he had mentioned that it's interesting. It's drawing attention to these parts of the gallery that we're always trying to hide, always trying to, I suppose, ignore or sort of downplay. And Gail's piece, and then also Jody Lin-Ki Chow's piece, which we'll get to a little bit later, are both highlighting these little idiosyncrasies of the gallery.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, it's a fairly intimate space. So we were really looking at the challenges of having a number of artists from around the world come in and focus on the theme of Catenations. And I think something that was interesting about Gail is I've known her work for a while, but we saw something that she had installed a fairly recent piece at Brick. And she was also following the pipes and the waterfront, and I thought that might be a really good kind of focus in terms of what was happening in the show. But for her to come in, I don't know if we had thought she was going to do it on the pipes, but then when she came in and she said, I'd really like to do that. And I love the fact that the piece hangs and is attached to, it's a very interesting kind of felt-like fabric, so it absorbs the light and also seems to drop into the wall in a really interesting way, which I think is a beautiful piece and works well with so many other pieces in, as I said, a very, I don't want to say packed show, I think it's nicely spaced, but works well with other pieces and not feeling like it's a kind of looming piece in the corner, but kind of moves you through. And I think that's what has been happening to a lot of the pieces in the show, where you're coming in and you're being directed around and through the gallery so that the whole exhibition becomes both one and separate at the same time. Maybe we should talk about Jody's piece, because I think she uses the architecture in a very, if not similar way, she kind of uses what might look like things that one tries to hide in a gallery, uses it in a positive way. So I don't know if you want to walk over and take a look at that.
Yeah, let's walk over to Jody's. And you had mentioned the theme of the show, Catenations. Let's talk about that.
Well, I think that it's a scientific term. It's about the molecular structure of water and how disparate elements come together and kind of form, kind of scientifically form a cohesive body. And we were thinking about that in terms of the artists that are in the show. People are looking at water from very different perspectives, and we really wanted that kind of range to be present, from the joy of interacting with the water to a spiritual quality. It's really interesting taking a look at Jody's piece, talking about, I think, what happens in the gallery, and the installation has an integral part of the architecture, and the challenges that those kind of pieces present. We were talking about Gail's piece, but I think in terms of Jody's piece, I know you and Jody spent 3 days, I think, installing this. What were the challenges you felt as you were working with her, or what did she feel as she was working, in collaboration with you?
Well, it certainly was. It certainly was a challenging install, and I think that one of the reasons it was so challenging was because she has never installed this on the ceiling before. This is an artifact from a performance, and we can walk over to the photographs on the wall here, which document the performance. So it's meant to be sort of an amorphous shape. It's essentially a giant pocket. It's large enough for a body to fit in. She normally emerges from it with a series of props. So it moves around. It's big, it's bulky, it's unwieldy. She has shown it on the floor sometimes, but to sort of have it defy gravity in this way was something completely new. And it was a really interesting and challenging install.
Well, I think what was exciting to me is over the course of the day, when we were looking at the skylight and the light would come in and it would cast a shadow on the wall, so it had a very interesting kind of organic quality to it. And as we move back, it's just this draping, active, hanging sculptural piece that also speaks to, I think also speaks to the weightiness of the subject matter and what it must have felt like with that kind of weight on her body and really pulling her down into the sand and the plastic that she pulled from the ocean and embedded it with that. Next to that piece is a piece that is about water and water parks. I don't know if you want to talk about that.
So one final thing I wanted to add about Jody's is she had mentioned that it really feels it looks the way it looks when it's performed in. Hanging it from the ceiling activates it in that way.
Right, so she's coming up into maybe the opening, or this is what happens as you're sort of looking at that opening as a performer and coming into that and feeling like you're encased and perhaps even in a very claustrophobic way, you're entangled in it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So then moving on to Phoebe. So Phoebe Muir is an artist that I've known for many years. She's a Philadelphia-based artist, a painter, and a persistent subject that she's been working with for, at this point, over 10 years is swimming pools and water parks. She really just has an exhaustive library collection of paintings of swimming pools and water parks. And one thing that I think is interesting about this painting in particular is how it's kind of become something for, I think, both of us, both Joe and I, to project our feelings about sort of the current situation. So we first started conceiving of the show, as Joe had mentioned, 1.5 years ago. We chose this painting for the exhibition, I would say sometime in January or February of this year. And at that time, we were both interested in this tension between this highly produced, highly synthetic space for water and the interaction with water. And a natural water, the coastline, and just the figures in the water park, and then the beach being completely empty of figures, and it seemed like a really, seemed to speak to kind of an unsustainability of sort of the way that we use water to kind of, just in the way that we use water. And then kind of as the pandemic started to happen, I think both of us were kind of noticing how kind of sparsely populated the water park was, and going into summer, and all of us kind of had these plans or had these hopes for what we wanted the summer to be, and it really wasn't any of that. I think really kind of spoke to both of our, feelings and anxieties about this world that we're
kind
in.
of just general malaise,
Yeah.
to use a word at the time. You know what might be an interesting counterpoint is to talk about Motohide's piece, which is down at the end of the gallery, and maybe talk a little bit. I think what came up in the artist talk that we had was that the work was originally produced during the time that the tidal wave came into Fukushima and released all of this radioactivity into the environment, and was really, and still is, kind of this all-encompassing event where I think he talked about that sense of this still white house. And white, I always think, in Japan, white is a color of grieving. You wear white to a funeral. And then this burst of this white, calm, perhaps, house, or, being, I suppose, just collectively and more generically, just bursting into flame. So the interesting thing, although I think Motohide was really wanting to focus on the original theme of this piece, we were talking about, our switch in perspective because of the currency of a narrative, and how that has an audience we start to read into the pieces and project our own meaning onto that. So I don't know, Rachel, if you want to talk about some of the things that came up for you with this piece, which continues to haunt me. It's a very haunting piece and very solid. I think what's nice is the paint is so solid, and then you have this beautiful sort of reflective quality, and we love the fact that it's on the water. So in the same way that Phoebe's piece was about the edge of the water, this was another. This kind of splits the painting in half. So you get this top, you get the submergence, and then you get the on fire piece of it. And I continue, because it's so solid here, I continue to think about that idea of grabbing onto something solid. And I think he was talking about finding that peace, or kind of way of healing. But of course now, with fires, start to think about environmental issues, which was part of what this piece was about, but also just the isolation, the aloneness that one feels, I think, when you look at this piece as well. Even it's the largest painting, or not just painting, but Gale's kind of extends, but this in mass, this is the largest piece, solid kind of piece that's in the gallery, and takes over, really anchors the show, I think.
Yeah, and for me, the house has been a stand-in for a figure, or stand-in for a kind of entity, stand-in for some sort of, it's a stand-in for a kind of singular concept. And so again, thinking about this.
Well, it's like no person is an island, or no man is an island.
Yeah.
This is very much about, maybe they are,
Right.
So I think that has that haunting quality, perhaps.
And this kind of irony of the solution to the fire is right next to it, yet inaccessible. But also, I think this is a painting that for me has been a place over, we've been living with this painting now for a long time, and it's been a place for me to kind of project how I feel about what's going on in the world right now. I mean, is the house a stand-in for our country? Is it a stand-in for, certainly we had a series of artist talks as the Black Lives Matter protests were sort of in progress and sort of
this has been 2020 has
right.
been quite a year, so I think the reading of a lot of work to me has spiked in a particular kind of way. I've either grabbed onto it or it's just been quite more emotional, passionate. I feel my senses are heightened because of the isolation and coupled with the anxiety that I think everybody's kind of going through. I mean, it might be a good point now to kind of look at the piece next to it and a tools piece. We didn't mention Motohide is from Japan, and a tool is from India. And I don't know, Rachel, if you want to talk about this piece a little bit. It's been quite meaningful, actually, this piece, because of what he's done. I'm going to just go along the bottom so people can see the
So if you come to the gallery this weekend, you can take some stickers with you. And so this artwork is based on a performance he had originally performed in Hamburg, Germany. And that's what the photo documentation here in this show is from. So it's based on a passage in the epic poem Mahabharata in which the Ganges River asks the prince a series of questions. And a tool here is sort of turning that situation on its head. He's engaging in a series of performances in which he's asking this body of water a series of questions. And the questions that he asks are here on the stickers. So he's inviting the viewers here to participate in this performance by taking these questions, and all he asks is that you go to a body of water and commune with this body of water, engage in a sort of contemplative experience by asking this question, or whatever question you choose.
Which seems, all of them seem really so relevant because, like this piece, what is my grief? You already held up what is my poison, what can cover the earth, what is my thought, what is my space, what is inevitable. Maybe that's what we're asking now. And maybe what we were all coming to terms with is what is my cause. So it's been this piece for me for, a kind of historic piece and a myth-based piece in India. You realize how universal it is and how relevant it is no matter what's happening. It's really been interesting. As we go around the corner, and this is next to Phoebe's piece, this is Cheryl Yoon. And her piece is, there are three-dimensional 3D prints. Cheryl's a photographer and is kind of exploring new territory with this work. And I think what's interesting is she is pulling stories or narratives about disasters from the internet that are, in reality they're dimensional, and then they get flattened out, and then she kind of recreates her own shape digitally and plays with these now weighty object-based narratives. I think a couple that really stand out for me is this piece where the glacier that is disappearing has actually disappeared. So she's dealing with memory and a kind of grieving, I think, with the edge, which is really beautiful here. And I think this piece also in the bottom, I love kind of the weightiness of this piece, the interrelationship to the floor, so it starts to move and kind of bend into the architecture. And I think what's nice about this piece is also it's something that she's exploring right now. It's kind of a new form, although she's worked with dimensional photographic pieces before, hasn't been in quite this way. And I think they're really beautiful pieces.
Yeah. And included in the title, in the image information, are links to each article in, I think, mostly the New York Times, where she pulled these photos from, and it's really interesting to look at the original photo and kind of pay attention to what parts of that original photo she chose to kind of extract and make dimensional again, as you said.
And then the interrelationship of the narratives,
Yeah.
the disasters, which I think asks us to, doesn't answer as many questions as it asks and poses to us as we maybe look and read about the context of the pieces and then go back and look at them again. So the story's provided there as well. I don't know if you want to talk about
Carolyn Schwab's work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is right next to and right below Phoebe's piece. And there are 2 pieces in the front and then 3 pieces in the back. And hers is a lovely piece. I don't know if you want to demonstrate it. So you're actually looking into your own kind of reflection, and there's something kind of wonderful because you're really concentrating on what water is rather than it's a metaphor, it's a symbolic act, but I think there's something kind of nice about actually seeing physically the water.
Yeah.
She kind of let us, I think, decide on perhaps or we could say we decided on separating, because I thought with this piece, for me, the pools of water lead you back into the space. And so they hold a bigger space and make me think in a much broader way about what space is, to quote what a tool has, what is my space? And I think that's interesting as well. And when we first received these, they were painted with a very kind of a rubbery paint, and so it's hard to tell, but I was thinking, I wonder how that's going to look. And I really love what happens to as you look through the water, because it's like there's a painting underneath that is offering an additional texture, and not just a flat container.
And we should mention that Carolyn is based in Germany, so these were sent from Germany.
Yes, in the middle of residencies I think she was in Denmark for a while, and then everyone's been traveling, and then no one's been traveling, except for the work. Do you want to talk about the 2 pieces that deal with electronic media?
Sure,
Should we go, this is right next to a tools piece. What's really interesting, about this piece is the marking of data. They're from Canada, and this is marking the border between Canada and the US. It's marking the private wells in Ontario. And they were talking a lot about public and private water, and really drilling into a water base that has no boundaries, and yet these are establishing very visibly the boundaries between the 2 countries, and sort of taking over of the geography of the border with these wells. And I really think is beautiful is that it's a physical data, but it's just a really beautiful kind of abstraction that's really clearly marking the divide.
Right.
And it also looks like, with Carolyn's piece, it looks like especially with the lights on, like you're looking into another pool of water. So I liked the height of this, like looking down into it rather than at it.
Right, yeah, it does feel sort of like another pool of water on the floor, and then sort of upon closer investigation, you see the data, and you see that it's a TV and or a screen. One thing that they were really interested in, that was very important to that was integral to the piece, was to have it installed on the floor, which again references the pool water and I appreciate how it kind of transforms the media, turns it into something that it's something else.
Yeah. And then right behind their piece is Bridget's piece. She's from Michigan, right? Is that right?
Yeah, Bridget Francis Quinn.
Detroit?
Yeah, she's in Warren, Michigan. Yeah. And I should mention that Owen Fernley and Julia Krolik, their artist's name as a collaborative pair is Pixels and Plans.
Which totally gives you an idea of what they do.
Yeah.
Bridget's piece, she has published, she has this publication that goes along with it, which is a recording of the sound, which is the cover, as well. Sort of a beautiful piece of, personal reflection and, her experiences going into these built caverns, these, man-made sort of structures, and singing to bring back, let's say, the spirit, So I think she takes groups in, and very, very haunting sound and beautiful kind of echoing that's happening because of this enclosure in a not very nice space. She was instrumental, although she wasn't looking for it, in a toxic spill one time when she went in and informed authorities about it, and that was cleaned up, and people, I think, who had the industry in the area were alerted to the fact that they couldn't do that anymore. So I think there's a healing that's happening not only with the singing, but also being alert to your environment. And I wish you could hear it, but I don't think that's...
Which we could pull the headphones out and play it. It is really beautiful. And one thing I want to mention is this, that I think is so cool, that Joe had already touched on, is this is a record that can be played on a record player, and one side is the singing that you hear in the video, and the other side is documentation of her participation in city council meetings, dealing with what she found an E. coli outbreak in these stormwater culverts and in the sewer system in her city.
And I like the Awe Society, which is a really beautiful logo.
Yeah.
Piece, and I don't know, Rachel, do you want to say a few things about this?
So
piece?
Mary Dwyer is a Connecticut, I believe Bridgeport-based artist, who paints, among other things, portraits of figures, oftentimes anonymous figures from throughout history and, say, currently living, and celebrating, paying homage to their work. So I believe she did a series on reporters. I think during the Arab Spring in the Middle East, possibly.
Nurses. She did a full series on many important historical women, especially now she's doing a lot of women in relationship to the vote. So, when we felt like these are sanitation workers, it's cleaning, people that clean toilets. And I think she was talking about this needed work for these workers are undertaking, that maybe many people would think, I don't want to do that kind of work, but how important it is that they are doing this job, and their importance within the society in which they're involved in this practice. And so she was really honoring those workers. I think there's a National Toilet Day that she was also referencing with this. She also works in healthcare, and I think many of her themes have to do with practices with water that relate to health. So that was part of the theme of this exhibition, was health and water. We started out more that way, and actually we've continued, whether it's spiritual health, whether it's physical health, and also even with, I think, Gail's piece, just that noting where water comes and goes, so. Right.
And you had mentioned World Toilet Day, this holiday that Mary is making this painting sort of in reference to, and it's a United Nations. It's a holiday sort of created by the United Nations. So highlighting sort of the important work that people are doing in parts of the world where, say, there's not a centralized sewer system, and
this is an essential task for them to do. Right. Yeah. So I think this is the final piece, right, in the show. I think you had come across it's Tim's work, right?
Timothy Fadick.
Yeah. And you'd come across this. Had you seen it in a journal? I know we were researching some artists. We had been familiar with some artists, so we were really both casting far and near, I would say, to put the work together in this show.
Yeah.
And where had you seen his work before?
So I believe I've seen his work in two places. One was definitely the Atlantic magazine. So Tim is a photojournalist, and he had, I believe it was in 2014, completed this project on which he was documenting the bleeding of horseshoe crabs, which is an essential. Horseshoe crab blood contains a chemical compound called LAL, which stands for something, I can't remember what it stands for right now, but it's an important chemical used in, as I understand it, the sterilization of medical equipment. So one thing that I'm also thinking about now is kind of how much medical equipment we're using in the pandemic, and nasal swabs, and as I understand it, every sort of piece of medical equipment that comes in contact with the body uses this compound is used to ensure it's safe to be used with the body.
Also, they're doing some research with the chemistry or the chemical compound in this that has to do with some sort of COVID research. I think we were reading about that recently. And I haven't picked up on anything more than just coming across an article and realizing I know about this because of the show and also this particular piece.
But I think it's such an arresting photograph. I mean, first of all, the color of the horseshoe crab blood, which is this kind of powder blue, is just, you know, I think as humans, just kind of really strange and kind of disarming to look at, and it's.
Well, and also just the milking too. It's this kind of, you know, get up, and you're sort of looking at this horseshoe crab, you know, millions of years old, or millions of years of evolution, really back to a kind of dinosaur days, and it's very unsettling to see this, you know, kind of stainless steel strapping that's going on with this piece. So there's a kind of beauty and a horror in this whole piece, and also just the fact, you know, of this sort of visceral feel of that syringe-like thing going right into the opening of the crab. So I think ending with that piece, hopefully there are things that I'm hoping this whole show is getting you here, but maybe coming down here, I think it has to be, experienced in person. And it's been a long time in coming, sort of, you know, sad to see it actually come down. I feel like I've been living with the work for a long time. So I'm hoping we've given you enough of a background on these pieces that you'll come down and take a look at the show. And as I said, October 11th, which is Sunday, the gallery is open 3 to 6, and also on Saturday the 10th, and by appointment as well. And I guess we're planning to deinstall on Monday. So,
yeah. As Joe said, it's been a long time. It's been a long time coming. It was originally supposed to open in March. Obviously, that didn't happen.
We're ending where we began with the two of us, and it's been really a delightful journey and a very challenging journey all at the same time. So it's really interesting too, because of so many challenges during this show, to actually get to know the work, as you were saying, and get to know the artists in a very deep way. Including the Zoom kind of round robin where they were asking each other questions and we were moderating for that. So sometimes wonderful things happen in very challenging, very hard circumstances that can become a time for creativity and also deep reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Zoom round robins that Joe is talking about are posted to the TSA website, so you can watch conversations between the artists, many of the artists in the show, and between Joe and I. So it's been a lot of fun. A little sad to see it come down.
But I know another show's going up, so.
Yeah, the next show is going to be very good. The next show coming up here. I'm excited for it.
All right, hope you stuck with this whole sort of video, but maybe we'll see you this weekend.
Yep. Thanks.
Bye.